our first visit, Dr. Goldstein wanted us both together. Our feeling from Dr. Goldstein was this is a mutual decision. This isn't a decision that can be made independent of each other, so he wanted to meet with both of us and go over all the details together. It was a good experience. He was very thorough in what our expectations should be, what his results could render, possibilities, potentials, and different scenarios that could happen, and explain those throughout. So it was a very comfortable experience talking to him and him relating to us what we should expect through the whole process.
Mm-hmm. Very clear in communicating what was going to happen. As far as the tests that I was going to go through, what Stephen was going to go through, and then also very empathetic, because he understands the emotional side of things as well. I mean, he was also, not just very thorough in talking to us about the process, but, I guess from his experience and, his field, and then also having children of his own, knowing that it's an emotional process when you're trying to get pregnant. And so, he was just very understanding with our feelings, and even addressing those things and saying, there's opportunities for counseling if you need it. And then also Linda, his nurse, is just very open about if you need to talk or, if you need to call her. So we felt very comfortable from the very beginning.
And during our consultation, he actually, he was referring to previous cases. This happened in this way that was similar to your situation. This happened in this way. Mm-hmm. So you could get from his conversation, the consultation, that he cares about his clients. And to move on down the road, of course, we've had success with this. He continues to ask us throughout our pregnancy process how we're doing, where we're at, what's going on. So he just didn't hand us over and say, okay, I'm going to do my job and be done with you. You could tell that he wants to stay with you throughout the process. He really cared about what was going on with us.
Yeah, we weren't just patients. We felt more like we were friends with him. So it was nice.
Yeah. Very honest. That's the thing I appreciated. Coming from the business world, sometimes you don't want to wade through all of the facades and acts that people want to put on. You just want the details and actual facts. And for me, Dr. Goldstein communicated that very well to me. He was like, this is, potentially what could happen. This is potentially the outcome if we go this way, the outcome if we go that way. And he offered us all the options. He never pushed us into a decision. He wanted to make sure, first of all, that he gave us the information. Secondly, he wanted to make the decision ours. I don't think at any point we felt like he was pushing us to do something versus something else, whether it's monetary, whether it's time, or anything. So for me, it was his communication of straightforward and being real honest with us.
Well, when we decided to go through with the IVF, Dr. Goldstein again, he was in no rush to get us started on the process, and he wanted us to be comfortable with it. And he's very cautious about making sure that you're ready for it, because it can be an emotional roller coaster ride. But as far as preparing us for the IVF, very, very thorough. Just in the whole process that was going to take place, what we might go through emotionally, and Linda as well. Books that you can read, places where you can go for counseling if you need it, people that you can talk to. And so when we started the whole process, we came in for our consultation, and again, just to go over things one more time. And once we did that, we decided we wanted to go ahead and start the whole process. So it's a cycle of, about a month and a half of being on medications. And for the female, that's a lot of stuff that you're going to go through with in vitro. And there's shots that you have to do every day. And sometimes you're doing shots, 2 to 3 times a day. And then even after the transfer, then you're still doing injections for, another month and a half or so, or however long they want you to do them. And so, I mean, just that process itself, when you're looking at it before you start, it seems overwhelming. But, with Dr. Goldstein and Linda both, just in the support that they provide and saying, you know what, it's just going to be a daily thing and we'll get through it together. If you have any questions, call us. And it actually ended up being a really good experience for Stephen and I, because it was kind of a bonding time for us. And, something that you feel isolated when, you're having to give yourself these shots and, why are you having to do this? It's not just you, your spouse is involved in that too. And so, Stephen was real helpful with me in giving the shots that I would need, and, I could do them myself as well. And I found that actually was not as hard a process as I thought it was going to be, because I thought, I will never be able to give myself a shot. And, you find that you have more strength within when you're looking at the ultimate goal of wanting to have a child. You're willing to do things that you never thought you would be able to do before. And it becomes something that's not that difficult. You find strength from within yourself, and, your spouse provides that, and Dr. Goldstein and Linda and everybody that's supporting you, even our family. So, it was a really good process. And so by the time we got to where it was the day to do the retrieval, I mean, I was feeling a lot of things. You're emotional because you don't know how many eggs they're going to be able to retrieve. How is it going to feel? And, it just wasn't a hard process. The day that came, time to do the retrieval, you feel a little bit bloated because, you've had medications to increase your egg supply. And so, but the retrieval wasn't bad. I remember we went in, and the nurses were really nice at the ARTS lab. And, I remember they gave me the IV, and they're like, okay, well, we're ready to go. And so they took me in, and everybody was very nice, very professional. And the next thing I knew, I was waking up, and I looked over at Stephen, and I said, why didn't they do it? And he said, well, they did. And so, I didn't feel any pain. It was such an easier process than I had allowed myself to think that it would be. And so, there was about another week and a half that you're waiting to find out if you were successful. And so, because, they've got to see how the embryos develop and what grade and what level they are to make sure that they're going to be good enough to transfer. And so by the time that you transfer them 5 days after or however many days they decide to do it, after the retrieval, that's a stressful time too. But it's also, again, it's just you've got this support system there that, allows you to get through it. And so, I think the hardest thing is the waiting. Once you've done the transfer and you're waiting to see if you're successful, that was the hardest thing for me. But the day that you get that pregnancy test comes back positive, there was nothing more exciting than that day.
Absolutely. And I think Dr. Goldstein takes it personal whenever some of his patients goes through it, because he was just as excited as we were about having a child, and so was Linda. So that was, more confirmation that we actually had people that really cared for what we were going through and how we got to where we are.
Well, Linda she's been a nurse for several years, and I believe she's been involved with infertility for several years as well. And she's just she has a very sweet demeanor and very approachable. She makes you very comfortable from the first time that you meet her. There's not ever, that time frame that you have to get comfortable with somebody. It's immediate with Linda. And then with Dr. Goldstein, it's nice that he is so bold at times, because he's going to be totally upfront with you about what he thinks he can achieve, or what your percentage is, or, what your options are, and all of that. And he's just very honest. And so for me, I felt like I wasn't going in blind at all. We were totally going to be prepared for what was going to be ahead of us.
Absolutely. I think that made the overall process easier because we were prepared and knew what to expect during each step of the process. So it made it, it took some of the angst and questions out that some other couples might have as they go through the process. Or actually other couples have asked us, well, what did you do or what happened there? And we're like, oh yeah, our doctor told us this should happen, and he was right on when he told us what would happen. The other great thing about Linda is Dr. Goldstein is very knowledgeable, and he will give you the clinical side, and he will back it up with, down-to-earth conversational discussion where we try to be able to process the information. Well, when you talk to Linda, she also is very knowledgeable and can conversate and be conversational about the information she's trying to get across to you. So it's very comforting that they can both go up to clinical and talk clinical if they need to, or they can get on a conversational level where most people communicate and, transfer the knowledge that way.
Good.
I'd say don't get hung up on the reason. You can point fingers or point blame, because that was the number one question when people found out we were going through infertility.
Yeah.
Well, whose fault was it? Why can't you get pregnant? My biggest suggestion to people that are thinking about this process is don't worry about that. Think about the end goal. Think about what you want to achieve, and not, a negative or a pessimistic outlook about, well, we can't do it because of this, because of that. Think about, here's my chances of having a baby, and that's what my ultimate goal is.
Mm-hmm. Because it's a team effort. So there's no one person that is at fault. It takes both of you to get pregnant. So, but I think for me, for the female side of it, it's such an emotional thing because there's so much pressure on you because you're the one that's supposed to carry the child. And, since we're little girls, we think, well, we're going to have 3 kids, and I'm going to name them, Cindy, Mindy, and Sarah. You just have all these plans from when you're a child, and you just have these expectations. And when things don't go that way, and you see everybody else around you getting pregnant, and just, teenagers getting pregnant, and, everybody getting pregnant around you, family, friends, without any problems, it's frustrating. And I think that there's several things that you can do. There's so many organizations out there that provide counseling, and there's so many more people out there that are going through infertility just like you are, and you don't realize it. And because it's just not a real talked about thing, unfortunately. And so I think that's one of our goals, that when we went through this whole process, I said, I really feel like I have a calling to talk to people, talk to women and even husbands, about infertility, because it shouldn't be something that is hidden and that should have shame, tagged to it, because it's not. It's an everyday thing that occurs, and just people aren't aware of it.
And I think the other, suggestion for other couples is make sure it's a decision that you both make together. Mm-hmm. Because even though the majority of the effort and the sacrifice is done by the female, there's a lot of, support that the male needs to provide, and a lot of emotions that they'll get both from their wife and also that they'll carry themselves. So make sure it's a decision that you're both going through, and not just one that is made by one of the parties and not both.
I would also suggest talking to your family. If you need an outlet, it's not always the best thing to go to your spouse. And you should definitely, like Stephen was saying, you should communicate about it and make sure that you're both on the same page. But when you're going through things emotionally, I know for me, it was an everyday struggle, and it almost becomes like an obsession that, I just don't understand. You find yourself doing all this research and putting a lot of blame on yourself. And, it just needs to be, you need to communicate as a couple, but at the same time, you need to have other outlets. If it builds up that much, it's not necessarily a good thing for your relationship if the person that you're always going to is your spouse, and if it's in a negative way. So I would encourage counseling, get with friends, do something positive each day just to get yourself kind of out of that rut.
From an office standpoint, especially in his office here, away from the arts lab and the medical center, it's very inviting. It's very comfortable when you come in here. You don't feel like the spotlight is on you when you're going through here either. There's just not a lot of exposure to a lot of other people, so you can still have your privacy while you're communicating and talking with Dr. Goldstein. As far as meeting with him directly, he typically meets you in his office, in his personal office, and he's one of the doctors, like I said, he interacts with his clients, and so he comes around the desk and he sits around at you at the table like you would envision if you were eating dinner. Everybody's sitting around the table having a discussion between family members. He gets around the table and he just starts discussing what's going on, why you're there, here's your options, et cetera, et cetera. So he makes it feel very comfortable, and again, there's not a lot of pressure on you whenever you're talking with him. And Linda's the same way. Whenever you talk to her, you feel like you've known her for years, and she talks to you very comfortably. It's very soothing, and so from an office experience, it's very nice. He also has his examination areas right next to his offices, so it's not like you're walking down the hallway to another area of the building to get examined or anything of that nature. And it allows the spouse to come in and also be a part of it. You make the decision together and you go through the entire thing together. I can be right next to Jamie the entire time because Dr. Goldstein's office and his layout is set up in such a way where it's very convenient for both of us to take part in the entire process.
Mm-hmm. When they know kind of what your options are, what you may be facing as far as what procedures you're going to go through, there's a packet that they provide to you that breaks down all of the prices of each of the procedures. And with IVF, there's a lot of things involved, not just with things that you should expect on a professional fee for Dr. Goldstein, but with the lab in particular. And so, there's several options that we were given, which were, the financing, and thankfully our insurance covered all of our medications, which we weren't expecting at all. We were expecting to pay for the entire IVF process ourselves. His office manager provided all of that information and called the insurance company, and is actually the one that found out, okay, here's what you're going to be expecting for the insurance company to cover. Here's what you're going to need to expect to pay on your own. But here's also financing options that are particular for infertility.
Dr. Goldstein, I would highly recommend his work and his staff to anyone that's interested in infertility. They do a tremendous job step by step through the entire process with you. I'd highly recommend him.
And his credentials, outstanding. Because you need to research that as well, because there's, a lot of OBGYNs that, they take on infertility themselves, but Dr. Goldstein's special in that, he specializes in reproductive endocrinology. And, that was important to me because I know that he had gone through those extra steps through additional education and knew probably more about the studies that had gone on and just had more experience. And so that was really important to me. You don't want to go into this process with someone that, not that an OBGYN, is not skilled enough to help you with infertility. I'm not saying that, but it's nice to have the added experience and the added education for someone, that's a reproductive endocrinologist. Make sure that you're on the same page about what you want to do, because it's a big decision. It's a big decision financially, what you're going to go through physically and emotionally, and what kind of stress it could put on your marriage if you allow it to. And so I would also suggest counseling, because there's so many opportunities available through which Linda can provide for an actual counselor for infertility through, I know our church provides counseling for infertility.
My suggestion is don't try to point the finger or point blame in the whole process. You're looking for the end goal, and that's to have a beautiful, healthy baby. And it's not to say, well, it's your fault we can't have a child, or it's your fault we can't have a child, because that's the number one question when people find out that you're going through infertility. They want to know whose fault it is. They want to know what's wrong. And if you just step around that and don't even address that issue, it'll be a positive process if you don't get caught up in pointing fingers and blaming each other, or letting other people talk about your blame.
The way we communicated to other couples, or even our family even, about what we were going through, is that you don't have to say exactly what the diagnosis is as to why you can't get pregnant on your own. What I would always say to people is that, well, we're facing an obstacle, and it's something that we're facing together. And that always seemed to keep people from going into the details, trying to ask more questions about why. Because it shouldn't be about the why. I mean, because the reason is to, like Stephen said, have a healthy child. It doesn't matter what the reason is, because you're a team together.